That was
Well,
probably not helping.
thank you. Ladies and
Is that it?
gentlemen, thank you for coming to ICA's virtual symposium.
All right.
This is going to be another great evening, and I let
Hello,
Jens Choi
is that
introduce
better?
our great speaker. Yes, very good. Jens, go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yunza Choi, a freshman at Azusa Pacific University in Azusa, California, and I'm a newly minted ICAS intern. It is my great honor to introduce our speaker, Dr. Matthew Kroenig. Dr. Kroenig is Vice President for Geostrategy and Fellows and Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. In these roles, he foresees multiple initiatives with the Scowcroft Center's bipartisan team focusing on U.S. and global security and strategy competition. Matt was appointed by the U.S. Congress as a commissioner on the Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States. He previously served in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community across multiple administrations. For his service, Matt received the Office of the Secretary of Defense's Award for Outstanding Achievement. In addition to his policy works, Dr. Kroenig is also a tenured professor of government and foreign service at Georgetown University. He is one of the most cited political scientists of this generation and an author or editor of 8 books on power rivalry and nuclear strategy. Being a columnist at Foreign Policy, his articles and commentary regularly appear in major media outlets. As Henry Kissinger's designated literary representative, Matt manages access to Kissinger's vast collection of personal papers. I would like to thank Dr. Kim, who has given me the opportunity to introduce Dr. Kroenig. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Matthew to the ICAS community.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. It's all yours. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's really a privilege. And I wanted to talk tonight about a topic that is not getting enough attention. The headlines are focused on Iran, on Venezuela, on Western Hemisphere and Indo-Pacific. But the North Korea challenge is an important challenge that I think is not getting enough attention. And I do think this is a dangerous moment for U.S. national security policy, and maybe one of the most dangerous moments we've ever faced. We have a major war in Europe, a major war in the Middle East, increased tensions in the Indo-Pacific, and we have this axis of aggressors, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, working together to undermine the United States and its allies. And in fact, these aggressors are working together more closely than Hitler, Mussolini, and Imperial Japan worked together on the eve of World War II, and we all know how much damage they've caused. In fact, Paul Post, a professor at the University of Chicago, recently tweeted about how this is already a world war, with major wars in Europe and the Middle East that are connected. So it is a dangerous moment, and of course, if there were to be a major conflict in the Indo-Pacific, I think many in the US national security community are focused on a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan, but that wouldn't stay somehow confined to the Taiwan Strait. I've done some writing, Marcus Garlauskas at the Atlantic Council has done some writing about any conflict with China would likely spread and become a region-wide war that would engulf the Korean Peninsula. And so the United States and its allies do need to think about simultaneous conflicts with China and North Korea, and maybe other adversaries like Russia and Iran at the same time. But in addition to the axis of aggressors, North Korea, of course, presents a major challenge on its own. For decades, the United States worked to stop North Korea from building nuclear weapons, and in that endeavor, it failed. And I think this is a story of bipartisan policy failure. The Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump 1 administration, all made major efforts to address the North Korea nuclear challenge, but none of them were able to rein it in. And I think in part because of that, the Biden and the administration and the Trump 2.0 administration have essentially put North Korea on the back burner and essentially think it's too hard of a problem. And so they're focusing on other issues. But of course, the North Korea problem continues to grow. So North Korea now, according to public sources, has dozens of nuclear weapons, has missiles capable of ranging U.S. allies and forces in the region, and has intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. So this is an important challenge. I think a nuclear North Korea contributes to regional instability. We've seen that a nuclear North Korea has been more aggressive, I would argue, since acquiring nuclear weapons, sinking a South Korean warship, shelling a South Korean island, and so on. There's the risk of further nuclear proliferation in the region because of North Korea's nuclear program. In this case, the worry that U.S. allies may no longer trust the U.S. nuclear security guarantee, and allies like Japan or South Korea may pursue independent nuclear arsenals. And then, of course, and there's also the possibility that North Korea could transfer nuclear or missile technology. And this isn't a theoretical concern. We know that North Korea helped the Syrian regime, the Assad regime, build a nuclear reactor. And so they could provide nuclear technology to other rogue states in the future. And then finally, and I wouldn't want to exaggerate this, but there is a risk of nuclear war in a major conflict between South Korea and North Korea, between the United States and North Korea. North Korea might have incentives to use nuclear weapons first. So this could result in a nuclear attack in Asia. Or given that North Korea has intercontinental ballistic missiles, this could result in a nuclear attack against the United States. So this is a serious threat. So what should the United States and its allies do about it? And at Georgetown University, I often tell my students that foreign policy problems are often challenging, and there is often no good solution. And the art of foreign policy making is choosing among bad options. With North Korea, I think we have a series of bad options, and in a sense, the strategy should be to try all of the above. So what do I mean by that? So first, I think we should not give up on diplomacy. And it's going to be challenging, but I do think returning to something like a maximum pressure and engagement policy is worth a try. To continue to increase the economic, political, and diplomatic pressure on North Korea, and to try to force Kim Jong-un to the table to discuss the elimination of his nuclear and missile program. And again, I think it's a long shot, but it's worth trying because that would be by far the best outcome. And I think there are things the United States can do to increase the pressure on North Korea: increased enforcement of secondary sanctions, stopping illegal transshipments that are helping North Korea to get around sanctions, and so on. Second, I think the United States should also prepare for deterrence and containment. Now, some people will say, well, we should give up on non-proliferation. It's obvious Kim Jong-un will never give up nuclear weapons. But I think that's the wrong policy. The United States should stand by its traditional non-proliferation policy of insisting on North Korean nuclear disarmament. And I think that's true for a number of reasons, including because the dangerous precedent it would set if the United States said, accepted North Korea into the nuclear club. I'm afraid that Iran and many other countries around the world might say, we want that deal. So the goal in diplomacy should be nuclear disarmament. But we have to accept the fact that North Korea does have nuclear weapons now, does present a threat to the United States and its allies. And so we need a serious deterrence and containment regime in place. And I think there are a number of components to that. I was honored, as was pointed out, to be appointed by the U.S. Congress to this Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States. And we argued that the current U.S. nuclear program of record is necessary but not sufficient. So it's necessary. We do need to modernize our intercontinental ballistic missiles, our submarines and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and our strategic bombers and cruise missiles. But that's not enough. Given China's massive buildup, I think the United States does, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, need to increase the size of its strategic deployed nuclear weapons. So in my view, it's a good thing that the New START treaty ended. That now provides the freedom for the United States to deploy additional strategic nuclear warheads. But importantly, in the case of North Korea, our commission also recommended that the United States develop and deploy additional non-strategic nuclear weapons to both Europe and Asia. So as this audience might know, during the Cold War, the United States did have non-strategic, sometimes referred to as theater or tactical nuclear weapons deployed on the Korean Peninsula. But after the end of the Cold War, we took everything back. And so now the United States has 0 deployed non-strategic nuclear weapons in the theater. And so we need to fix that. One way to fix that is this SLICM-N capability, the nuclear sea-launched cruise missile that was called for in the Trump 1 administration has now become the program of record. It hasn't yet entered into service, but once it does, we'll have a theater capability on ships that can be deployed in the region. But personally, I think that's not enough, and that it might also make sense to have air-launched or ground-launched theater range nuclear missiles in both Europe and Asia. And indeed, once we have the SLICM-N, the engineers I talked to say it wouldn't be too hard to put one of those in a box and deploy it on land. And so I think there's a deterrence component to this, that the North Koreans would know that the United States has options to respond to a nuclear attack short of a major strategic response. But I also think there could be a major assurance benefit of this as well, given the worries about South Korea or Japan possibly entertaining an independent nuclear arsenal, having non-strategic nuclear weapons, American non-strategic nuclear weapons in the region, maybe even returned to South Korean territory, I think could assure allies that they are indeed protected by American nuclear weapons and they don't need to pursue their own nuclear weapons. And I was very pleased to hear Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy for War, reaffirm America's traditional extended nuclear deterrence policy and also reaffirm America's traditional non-proliferation policy. The Trump administration's policy is to discourage allies from building nuclear weapons, but to reassure them that America's extended nuclear deterrent continues to work. I went directly to nuclear, but also, of course, the conventional deterrence is important. And the Trump administration has also called out South Korea as a model ally that is pulling its own weight on defense. And so allies stepping up and doing more for conventional defense is going to be important in Korea, also in NATO and elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific. As part of this deterrence policy, missile defense plays an important component. And so theater missile defenses are already in the region, THAAD and other capabilities in South Korea. But there's more we can do in the region to defend Guam and elsewhere. But also an important part of this, I think, is homeland missile defense. And the Trump administration has made Golden Dome a major priority. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And indeed, this Congressional Commission on Strategic Posture, on which I served, recommended that the United States does develop a more robust homeland missile defense system that can deal with threats. Well, we said it needs to be able to stay ahead of the North Korea threat, but also be able to defend against coercive attacks from Russia and China. So the Golden Dome concept hasn't been fully fleshed out, at least publicly, And there are many ways this could be done by increasing ground-based interceptors in the United States, more space-based sensors. You can't see what you can't hit, so you need good sensors. But ultimately, I think moving interceptors into space would make a lot of sense, so you could intercept adversary missiles in their vulnerable boost phase, not when they're already hurtling through space or back toward their target. And so this would strengthen America's extended deterrent to South Korea because we could be clear to the South Koreans and to the North Koreans that we can stand firm in defense of South Korea without risking a major attack against the US homeland. So I think we need to do more on diplomacy, more on defense. And then finally, I think we do need to prepare for conflict. And nobody wants a conflict with North Korea. But as they say, the enemy gets a vote. And if North Korea were to attack the United States or South Korea tomorrow, as US Forces Korea, a slogan has it, we need to be prepared to fight tonight. And so, a US first strike on North Korea is really hard to imagine. But if North Korea used a nuclear weapon or two or three, at some point a US president is going to say, we have to make this stop. And so I think the United States does need a strong ability to strike. Well, first, a strong ISR capability to better understand where are North Korea's strategic assets, a better strike capability, conventional and nuclear, to be able to degrade North Korea's missile and nuclear program. And for those of you who may think, well, that just seems unrealistic, I guess I'd ask you to look at what's happening in Iran right now. I think many people would have said that what's happening in Iran right now seemed unrealistic maybe just a few months ago. And so preparing for the worst with North Korea, I think, is also important. So there's much more I can say, but I think I was asked to speak for 15 or 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I'm almost there. But I guess I just wrap up by saying it is a dangerous moment in world history. I think there is a focus on this axis of aggressors, but a lot more attention on Russia and Iran and China. And North Korea threat continues to exist. And we can't forget about that. We can't keep putting it on the back burner. And I do hope the Trump 2.0 administration makes a more active effort in the coming weeks and months to address this critical threat to the United States and its allies.
ICAS is not an agent of any government or foreign principles. There's no foreign fund involved in the ICAS activities. That said, who's going to come out first? Daniel Okay, if not, Sean Creamer, go ahead. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, it's good seeing you again. I think this is our third call this week that we're on the line. So
yeah.
No, I appreciate the comments. You know, I've heard you speak in the past as well. Just a couple comments is you made some comments about the NPT and trying to keep it going, but I think it's also been broken for a while, and I've always been critical of the lack of holding some of the violators accountable. In particular, China. They're probably the biggest proliferator that no one really talks about, and they've never been held to account. And you know, just all the researchers that I've met through all the years, unclassified, they all say that the North Korean warhead design is a Chinese design. Same thing with the Pakistani warhead. So they're the biggest proliferator, and I think we just need to kind of also accept that, you know, to a degree, that the NPT is broken, and I think we just need to probably do some deep thinking on how do we go forward. It's similar to the conversation we had earlier about the international order. It seems to kind of be broken right now, and what comes next. So I think there's value in the NPT, but we just have to find some. How do we keep the good parts, and how do we keep it going in the forward? But in its current form, it's kind of broken, and the only one that seems to be really holding the that seems to be holding the line on that is the United States and, you know, the Western affiliated countries. I don't see North Korea ever giving up its bomb. I think they've seen Libya, they've seen Iran. I don't see them really ever going to being a South Africa where they give up the bomb. And again, I'm not the smartest guy in the subject, but I think we need to probably, you know, be a little bit more realistic in what our expectations are. I do think there's some openings that, you know, we could probably get North Korea to be maybe less belligerent. Because I think they're probably, when they really step back and look at it, they're probably just as afraid of the United States as they are of China. They see that coming over the horizon. And between the Chinese Communist Party and the Korean Workers' Party, there's a long history of violence. There's a whole reason why Kim Il-sung was in the Soviet Union during World War II. And that's because the Chinese tried to kill him in the late 30s and all that. I did appreciate your comments on the nuclear modernization, but I think, and I'm a full supporter on one. We need more, but I don't think we need a whole lot more. But we need to diversify the arsenal. We need to probably go back, is like you said, probably to like a Pershing 3. But I think on the policy side with our allies is there's a little bit of apprehension. Is yes, some I think want to host, but a lot of them are a little bit that don't want to host. And I kind of go back to the old Margaret Thatcher comment that, hey, if we expect the United States to have the nuclear umbrella over the UK and over Western Europe, then we need to host the sensors. We need to host be a host of the interceptors, and we need to be a host of the actual systems themselves. Because you can't expect the United States to provide that kind of umbrella and bear that kind of risk without some kind of shared approach. And I think that's the conversation that, from a policy perspective, that Bridget Colby's team probably need to have those conversations with our allies. And again, just, I know you're here to talk about Korea and everything, but I would also like your thoughts on preparing conflict. I know I gave some comments here, but on preparing conflict, just about your thoughts on increased defense spending. 3.3% of GDP is not going to cut it. It hasn't cut it. And I think we probably need to go back and start thinking about growing the force, particularly some of the enablers. And I think we're starting to catch it now. We haven't built a frigate in 30 years, and we really could use a lot of frigates right now in the Strait of Hormuz. We haven't built a mine layer in, probably since Nixon was in office. And we let our merchant marine fleet go. And I'm a big reader over here on my over my right shoulder are the Army Green Books on the Pacific, and in there the logistics infrastructure that we kind of have let go is going to be our Achilles heel, and all that. So I would like to steer your next remarks on the preparing for conflict and what we should start thinking about on our side here, and then in our engagements with decision makers in Washington, congressional delegations, what we should perhaps start to whisper in their ear. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, Matt, your response.
Well, thanks for those really smart comments, Sean. And we're so fortunate to have you as one of our senior fellows at the Atlantic Council. So nothing less. So first, a couple of comments to your comments, and then I'll get to your question. So on the NPT, challenges for sure. I think broken is too strong. And in fact, overall, I would say it's working, just in the sense of we have almost 200 countries on Earth. The NPT is nearly universal, 190 or so members, and the vast majority of them are complying with the treaty. No problems with the Canadians, the Belgians, the Haiti, etc. So overall, I think it's working. But you're right that there are problematic cases, and the most problematic cases are these revisionist autocracies in the axis of aggressors who don't really respect the rules-based order and are trying to tear it down. So I completely agree that more scrutiny on them and efforts to stop their illicit transfers is important. Including, I didn't mention this at the top, but I should have, part of this axis of aggressor collaboration is we have North Korean forces on the ground in Ukraine. I think something that, many people thought would have been unthinkable again 5 years ago. And then what are the North Koreans getting in response? I assume the Russians are giving them something of value. And is that also sharing scientific expertise on strategic weapons? So I think you're right to focus on the nexus among these autocratic adversaries. I also think, you have a good point that it is really hard to imagine Kim Jong-un saying, I'm going to be South Africa and I'm going to give up my nuclear weapons tomorrow in exchange for sanctions relief or something like that. But 2 points I'd make. One, I still think as a matter of declaratory policy, the United States should maintain its policy of not accepting a nuclear North Korea and pushing for disarmament, in part because of the precedent it would set to have a country sign the NPT, cheat on the NPT, build nuclear weapons, and then have the United States say, okay, that's fine, we're okay with this. What do the Iranians and others do? A second point I'd make is, I guess while I see it as unlikely right now, I don't know that it's impossible that North Korea would ever give up nuclear weapons. I could imagine scenarios. Kim Jong-un has a heart attack tonight. There's some kind of struggle for power, especially with a pragmatic president like Trump in power. Does he see a Venezuela option in North Korea? Does he go to one of these vying factions and says, hey, I'll back you. You can be the new president of North Korea, just give up your nuclear weapons. Hard to imagine, I agree, but not impossible, I think. We're on the same page and more diversity on nuclear forces. And to your question on defense spending, I agree completely. During the Cold War, the United States spent an average of 6 or 7% of GDP on defense. Now we're at something like 3.5%. So we could almost double defense spending and just to make it to our Cold War levels. And I think that's necessary. We are in a world that I think is in many ways more dangerous than the Cold War because China is more capable than the Soviet Union ever was, but it's working with this axis of aggressors. So I loved President Trump's call for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. I think he's right about that. At the Atlantic Council, I was honored to moderate an event with Rob Whitman on the House Armed Services Committee, and he said, going there overnight is going to be difficult. Could the system even choke down that much money? But that over time, he thought that was a good thing to aim for. So I completely agree that allies need to do more. Trump administration is right about that, but the United States also needs to do more.
Thank you very much. Daniel, are you there? Dan.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Thanks so much, Dr. Kroenig, and thanks so much, Dr. Kim. So a number of questions, but let me just start with one of your comments up at the top, that there is a concerning degree of collaboration among I think you call it the axis of aggressors more so than seeing perhaps World War II. And at the same time, I can imagine that even without deep coordination, these countries could simply be opportunistic, right, and take advantages of opportunities or cleavages in U.S. alliance, et cetera, et cetera. Curious, what kind of signals would you be looking for? What kind of information might you be looking for, even without coordination, that these U.S. adversaries could be looking for opportunistic chances? For instance, if China were to initiate an invasion of Taiwan, what would you look to see whether North Korea were thinking the same about South Korea, or Russia expanding the war beyond Ukraine, et cetera? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yes, it's a good question, Daniel. Thank you. And I completely agree with the premise of the question. The worry about simultaneous conflict is not just that the adversaries would plot to start wars at the same time, but also opportunistic aggression. And I mean, imagine a war with Taiwan kicks off tomorrow, God forbid, but if that happened, hard to believe that Putin just sits on the sidelines and eats popcorn. If U.S. forces are really tied down in the Indo-Pacific, this could be a good opportunity for him to go after a NATO ally in, Lithuania or something like that. Alternatively, if the war in Ukraine spills over international borders, becomes a NATO-Russia war, hard to imagine Xi Jinping doesn't do anything. Does he see this as his opportunity to move? And as you point out, North Korea as well. And for those who haven't seen it, I mentioned already, Marcus Garlauskas on our team did a really good study on simultaneous China-North Korea conflict about all the different ways that a China-North Korea conflict could simultaneously kick off. And most of it was not about collaboration, but about natural dynamics of a conflict. So for example, if the United States is using forces based in South Korea against China, does China start attacking forces on the Korean Peninsula? That's one possible pathway, but he laid out many others. Would China encourage North Korea to cause provocations to distract the United States? If the United States is flowing large amounts of forces into the Indo-Pacific to respond to a China scenario, does North Korea see that as a possible regime change type operation where they would feel they need to strike first to fend that off? So there are a lot of dangerous dynamics. What to look for? Fortunately, in some of these scenarios, there would be more warning signs than others. So let's say it starts in Europe. In order for China to engage in any kind of large-scale aggression against Taiwan, say an amphibious invasion, we likely would see them massing forces on their coastlines, and so we would loading up into ships and so on, and so we would have some warning time. In other cases, maybe less so. If it were just, again, China encouraging North Korea to engage in provocations, North Koreans could put a missile launch together on pretty short notice. Good question. I want to think about it more. And if you have insights on what we should be looking for, I'd welcome those as well.
Thank you. Dan, do you have any follow-up question?
Thank you. I have an unrelated question. If I can introduce a separate topic. The question being, given your close observation of President Trump's foreign policies, I'm curious what you think his internal checklist is when he decides to employ military intervention. Why have we seen intervention in Venezuela, Iran, and Yemen, for example, but not Cuba, Colombia, other places so far, Greenland, for instance? I'm curious what you think the internal checklist is. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, and on Cuba, I think the so far warning may be appropriate. It does seem like something's getting ready to happen on Cuba. Maybe military force won't be necessary. Maybe economic coercion will be sufficient, but it does seem like there's something brewing in Cuba. I guess a few things I would say. One, I always took the threats against Iran and Venezuela seriously and wrote pieces ahead of time saying that Trump should follow through on those threats and remove Maduro and degrade the Iranian nuclear program. On the other hand, I always saw the threats against Greenland as a negotiating tactic. And I think we do know that Trump has this kind of businessman style of negotiating, of making kind of bold claims or threats, throwing the other side off balance, and hoping that they'll come to the table to make a deal. And I always thought that was the case in Greenland, in part because it's really hard for me to imagine President Trump engaging in a military attack against a NATO ally. And I think I've been proven right there as well. We are in negotiations now over Greenland, I'm told, being led by the State Department. I guess another point I'd make is talking about Trump's peace through strength doctrine, because you have a lot of confusion, I think, in the media now saying, wait a second, President Trump said that he was opposed to using force. He's not going to start new wars. But that's never what I heard from Trump. What I think peace through strength means is that the president prefers peace. But it's not peace through appeasement or accommodation, it's peace through strength. And so he is willing to punch adversaries in the face, use short, sharp, decisive uses of force, as we've seen in Venezuela and Iran. But I do think he's skeptical of long, drawn-out military campaigns with no clear end in sight, like Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine. And so as we look to what's happening in Iran right now, many people are saying this could become a quagmire, but I just don't see that. I think this is a bombing campaign that will last for 3 or 4 weeks, as President Trump said in the opening days, and then it will wind down. So there may be lessons there for thinking about the North Korean peninsula as well. I think that President Trump would be willing to consider the use of force. In fact, in the Trump 1.0 administration, we know they seriously considered so-called bloody nose strikes against the North Koreans. And so I wouldn't put something like that past President Trump, but I think he would be unlikely to engage in a large-scale ground invasion of North Korea without serious provocation first from Pyongyang.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Very insightful.
Yeah. Alan Gold. Alan, go ahead.
I forget the exact question that I was going to ask, but I heard what Sean said and followed up with what Matt said. I think that you fellows are looking at a war or military tactics of about 30 years ago, because drones are becoming more effective and smarter and cheaper. And all you need a few of them to get through to our defenses to disable a nice sized boat, and to spend hundreds of billions of dollars building more equipment on the ocean that might not be effective. It just doesn't make sense to me. And where we're getting the money for all this, I can't understand why I know the Democrats spend a ton of money, and now it turns out Trump is spending more money as he did the first term, spent a lot more than he said he would. We can't even pay the interest on our debt. We can't even slow the acceleration of the growth of our national debt. I'm not talking about the annual deficit. I'm talking about the debt, which you can't fudge. So what do we do about it?
Very good. Thank you, Alan. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, smart questions, Alan. Let me focus on the debt side first. Fortunately, the United States is in a strong position as the world's #1 economy, the center of the global financial system, the holder of the reserve currency in the dollar. And so still to this day, the Treasury bond is the safest investment on earth. And so the United States has what the French refer to as exorbitant privilege. The United States is the only country on earth that can create wealth at the printing press because the rest of the world wants to hold dollars so badly. And I wrote a book in 2020, if you're interested, about democratic advantages in great power rivalry, starting with ancient Athens and going all the way up to the United States. And this is a recurring feature of democratic, more open systems. The Dutch Republic was a superpower in the 1600s because it could finance its wars and empire through issuing of debt. So that's where we get it from. There's an insatiable desire from investors all over the world to hold U.S. Treasury bonds. But I still agree that at some point it becomes a problem, and we need to get our debt and deficit under control. But the way you do that is not on the back of defense, but by reforming entitlement spending. And if I could share my screen, I could even pull up some charts. But a picture tells 1,000 words. If you look at U.S. government spending over the coming decades, defense is a very small portion. It's going to Social Security, it's going to Medicare, and these are the third rails of domestic politics, so difficult for politicians to reform. But really modest reforms, say pushing retirement benefits back by a year. So not for people like you, but maybe to my students at Georgetown, say, hey, you're young, you're 22. Instead of taking retirement at 65, you have to wait until 66. There's enormous savings to be had by some marginal reform. So I think that's the one of the main fixes to our financial problems. On drones, I completely agree, and we're seeing that on the battlefield in Ukraine. It's transforming warfare. And I think we're beginning to learn the lessons in the United States, and Admiral Paparo has talked about this with regard to a Taiwan Straits contingency. He has what he calls his hellscape concept of using drones, surface drones, underwater drones, aerial drones, to crash into Chinese ships to prevent them and deny them from landing on Taiwan. And I'm sure there are parallels for a North Korea conflict as well that I haven't spent as much time thinking through. But I'm sure Commander of U.S. Forces Korea is, and others are. But I completely agree. We're living through what may be a revolution in military affairs. So thinking about how AI, drones, space would contribute to a future conflict is very important.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. Chung-Soo, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. You mentioned a few times about Iran. How is the war going? United States attack on Iran. Are we succeeding in that war? Isn't it the truth that the Iron Dome in Israel is no longer functioning, and the drones and the missiles are raining down on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and especially the hypersonic missile, nothing can actually intercept. So tied to that, I want to recall that you did talk about Golden Dome and possibility of building some kind of a defense interceptor in South Korea. But do we have a data that proves that interceptor batteries or Patriot battery, whatever it is, are they actually working? I mean, isn't the Iranian war a proof that they are failing?
Well, you'd be very proud of me.
Good. Well, smart questions. And so first, how is the Iran war going? And I guess as a starting point, I would look to President Trump's speech on the Saturday morning that the war started. And he said that the goal is to degrade Iran's nuclear program, degrade its missile program, degrade its drone program, and degrade its navy. And then also toward the end of the speech, he said to the Iranian people, when the bombing stops, this will be your best opportunity in a generation to rise up and take your country back. So it seems like the essential goal from the US point of view is degrading Iran's military capabilities. And then a secondary non-essential goal is changing the Iranian government. So on the first part, I think we're succeeding remarkably well. The nuclear program has been set back. The missile and drone programs have been set back. And we see that Iran's launches of missiles and drones have greatly decreased since the war started. That's because their stockpiles are lower, their launchers are being wiped out. And now part of the reason this is going 3 and 4 weeks is the United States is going after manufacturing capabilities of missiles and drones, which will make it hard for Iran to produce these capabilities for years to come because they have to rebuild the entire war supporting industry. Something like 90 Iranian ships have been sunk, so their navy has been virtually wiped out. So no matter what happens with regard to governance in Tehran, the Iranian military is going to be much weaker for years, maybe even a decade to come. And so that's a significant benefit to the United States and its allies that have been faced with these threats for so long. On the regime change part, I think it's too early to tell. Many people are saying, oh, they've nominated a new supreme leader, this isn't working. But I don't know about you, I've seen no evidence this supreme leader is actually alive. We haven't seen a photo of him, we haven't heard him speak. It's reported that he's badly wounded. Laranjani, who was a key civilian until recently, was just killed. And if you look at President Trump's statement on the first day, he said when the bombing stops, that's when the people should rise up. The bombing hasn't stopped yet. So I think it's way too early to tell what the future of governance in Iran will be. And obviously, if we get a new government that is more cooperative internationally and more respectful of the human rights of its people, that would be an enormous benefit and potentially transformational for the security of the region and the world. On missile defense interceptors, so to be honest, I'm busy. I haven't seen all the news from today. But I think what we've seen over the past several years and months is that missile defenses work much better than people expected. We saw the massive Iranian missile and drone attacks against Israel in April and May of, was it 2024? Basically with no damage. Israel and American allies were able to shoot almost everything down. Some things got through, but didn't land in important areas. Some more stuff is getting through, I think, in recent days, just given the volume in an ongoing war. But overall, I think there's a lot of data that these things are effective. I've seen data that suggests that the more theater-based systems, things like THAAD and Patriot, something like 75% accuracy, and the homeland missile defenses, something like 50% accuracy. But of course, there's nothing that says the United States only needs to send one interceptor for one incoming missile. So if your SHOT doctrine has multiple interceptors going at each incoming projectile, then your chances of success are much higher. So I do think there's benefit to missile defenses, even if they're not perfect. And on hypersonics, you're right that hypersonics are more difficult than traditional weapons, but our adversaries exaggerate how good their stuff is. And we did see that the Ukrainians shot down a Russian hypersonic missile using Patriot battery. And it is a cat and mouse game, so the adversaries are trying to get around our missile defenses with hypersonics. And so now we're working to improve our missile defenses to deal with hypersonics. So it is a challenge for now, but I don't think it's insurmountable.
Very good. Thank you. Hide, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you, Dr. Kroenig, for sharing your insights. My name is Hide Jang. I'm an ICAS intern. Under the South Korean constitution, North Korea is defined as an anti-state entity. However, the current South Korean administration, including President Lee Jae-myung and the Minister of Unification, Chung Dong-myung, has expressed a willingness to respect North Korea's regime, reject absorption-based unification, and pursue peaceful coexistence. At the same time, President Trump has emphasized South Korea's role in deterring North Korea. So my question is, in this context, how might South Korea's more conciliatory approach affect deterrence dynamics and overall stability on the Korean Peninsula? Thank you.
Yes, good question. And obviously, the United States celebrates that South Korea is a democracy. And so policy changes depending on the administration in power. And we've seen that over the years. And the United States respects its allies and so wants to work closely with them. And so, won't make any major decisions about South Korea without South Korea at the table. For the harder line approach that I maybe lined out of return to maximum pressure, I think there could be challenges working with the current government. And we saw some of that with the Moon Jae-in government and Trump 1.0. Unfortunately, from my point of view, it doesn't seem like this is a priority right now for the Trump 2.0 administration. And so the more conciliatory approach that you mentioned doesn't seem to be getting in the way of any American designs. But if the Trump 2.0 administration watches this video and is persuaded by my arguments, and they do want to go for a harder line approach, what I would recommend, of course, is that the first phone call they make is to the Blue House and coordinate a strategy with our close allies in Seoul.
Very good. Yunso Choi, are you there?
Hey, Dr. Kim. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing your insights in North Korea nuclear strategy. My question is, we have this present US-Iranian war going on, and because North Korea has been a close ally with Iran, I want to know whether there is any possibility that North Korea may get involved in the Iranian war as it did in the Ukraine war?
Well, it's a really clever question, and not one that I'd considered until now, to be honest. But now that you raise it, it's a good point. We did see North Korea, of course, send forces on the ground in Ukraine to fight with the Russians. Not something I anticipated, or I think many others anticipated until it happened. We also saw China and Russia talk about rushing air defenses into Iran just before the conflict started. There's reports that the Russians are providing the Iranians with intelligence information about the location of American assets in the region to help the Iranians with their targeting. So I think not out of the question that the North Koreans might be looking for a way to get involved. How would they do that? Interesting question. Would they send forces like they did to Russia and Ukraine? Maybe not. This seems to be more of a bombardment campaign right now, where ground forces might not be that helpful. But it's an interesting question, and I think something we should be paying attention to.
Very good. Okay, Sean, follow-on question, Sean.
All right.
Okay, very good.
So just looking at obviously the Trump administration released some different shifts in their strategic documents, national security strategy, national defense strategy. And I think what we're seeing is probably an implementation of that. And unlike past strategy documents, which tended to be aspirational, I think this seems to be kind of a blueprint that they seem to be executing. So I guess my question is ultimately, I think some in the administration are probably looking at this strategic competition with the CRINC, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, that axis of autocracy. Is conflict unlikely, likely, or probable? And I think they probably are falling in the likely or probable side. And so they are doing I see some of these things: Venezuela, the border, the shaping of Cuba. What we're seeing in Iran is shaping operations to deliberately shape the strategic environment. Where do you think they go next? And particularly for this audience here, obviously we've spent a lot on the homeland, spent a lot on the Western Hemisphere. We're now shifting to Iran. Iran has kind of had a knife at the Strait of Hormuz for almost 50 years. And this is, if you're going to lance that boil, so to speak, this is probably the time that Iran is the weakest. And so I see they're taking this opportunity to deliberately shape that, because if you are going to get into a conflict, particularly in the Western Pacific, you don't want to have to worry about the Strait of Hormuz, and you don't want to have to worry about the Western Hemisphere. So I think they're kind of setting the theater, so to speak. So I guess the question: where do you think they go next after Iran? And what do you think they're going to try and shape as they go forward?
Well, thanks, Sean, for that. And, you may be imposing more of a strategic logic on what's happening than exists. I don't know. But I think you're right. There is a strategic logic. And, because if you're worried about simultaneous conflict with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, threats in the Western Hemisphere, removing some of those pieces from the chessboard does then make the rest of the problem easier. And I do think that we have the potential to remove Iran from the chessboard here. And so what comes next? Maybe this goes against this idea that it's about positioning for China, but I think Cuba's next, and we already see it. We've heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say, if I were in Havana, I'd be a little bit worried. Trump in the Oval Office just on Monday said something like, I think I'm going to have the honor of owning Cuba. I think we've seen reports that Cuba's already released political prisoners, reports that there are negotiations underway with Marco Rubio about reforming Cuba's communist system. I guess that does also, though, improve the global chessboard. Venezuela and Cuba have been threats in our backyard for a long time. And so turning them into, if not pro-American, but at least proxy states who have friendlier foreign policies, I think do make the U.S. Near abroad safer, that could allow the United States to project power and focus on other threats, like the Indo-Pacific, which was called out as the #2 priority in both the national security strategy and the national defense strategy.
Very good, Matt. Hije, do you have follow-on question?
Yes, Dr. Kim, thank you. I hope, Dr. Kroenig, you don't mind a slightly personal question. I aspire to pursue graduate studies in the future and eventually work at a think tank. As a 22-year-old student, what intellectual and personal qualities or habits should I be developing now to build a meaningful and successful career like yours? Thank you.
Wow.
Well, it's a good question. I'd say apply to graduate school at Georgetown and take some classes with me, and then come work with Sean and me at the Atlantic Council, and you'd be a great addition to the team. So at 22, maybe you're not in graduate school yet. I guess I would have encouraged you to apply to a strong graduate program, the best one you can get into. And, student loans and things can be daunting at this age, but my view is that you'll pay them off over time. And by the time you're my age, you won't even remember that. So go to the best school you can. And then I don't know where you're based now and where you hope to practice your career, but I think there is value to studying where you want to have your career. So if it's in Washington, I'd suggest going to a good school in Washington because you can do internships while you're in school. Your professors know people in town, can help you get jobs. You'll meet people in class and elsewhere that will help you get jobs. And so I'd say study where you want to build your career. And then I guess 2 other pieces of quick advice, and it might sound obvious, but be nice to people. Washington's a small town. The people who are sitting next to you in class or the boss at your internship today, might be hiring for a job 20 years from now, and you want them to have a good impression of you. And I've seen that happen so many times. In fact, I was an intern at the Pentagon in 2005. And my supervisor is the person who hired me to the Atlantic Council eight years later. And then a final piece of advice, I'd say focus on your writing skills, because I think doing policy, talking to people, you can, we're reaching some people right now through talking, but if you can write well, you can reach a much larger audience. And in government and in think tanks, writing is so important. And, when I look at my team at the Atlantic Council, my junior staff, the ones who can write well essentially do my job for me. They can draft articles for me, draft emails for me, draft memos for me. The ones who don't write well, I sometimes feel like I'm doing their job for them because they send me something and I have to scrap it and start over with a blank sheet of paper. So really work on your writing skills. And it is a skill. I'm a better writer now than I was your age. Like anything, it gets better with practice. But if your boss can turn to you and know that you can capture the notes from a meeting or anything else clearly and concisely and quickly, you're going to be very valuable.
Very good, Professor. Yunso, do you have any follow-on question?
I have another question from my previous one, and I apologize in advance that it may be a little green. So you mentioned the possibility of nuclear war from North Korea. And as South Korean, I was wondering what factors do you think may trigger North Korea to use its nuclear weapon? And would there be any sign of approaching nuclear attack in future?
Yeah. So I don't think that, despite the funny haircut and everything else, I don't think Kim Jong-un is crazy. I don't think he's going to wake up one day and say, today's a good day for nuclear war. So I don't think a bolt out of the blue nuclear attack is the concern. But if there were to be a serious conflict on the Korean Peninsula for whatever reason, he would have to worry about, is his regime at risk? Is his life at risk? And so faced with the prospect that, that the United States and South Korean forces could roll into Pyongyang, that he could die, faced with that prospect, then using nuclear weapons, maybe even early, maybe in a limited way, to send a message could be attractive. Hoping that whoever's in the White House would say, oh my goodness, do we really want a nuclear war with North Korea? This is out of hand. Let's look to de-escalate this conflict immediately. And he wouldn't be crazy to think that. I could imagine some recent US presidents who might say, yeah, this is too risky. Let's look for de-escalation and off-ramps. So I think that's the biggest concern, a conventional conflict that's beginning to escalate. And, it's a term we often use to describe Russia's nuclear strategy, escalate to de-escalate. But I could see North Korea following a similar logic by using a small number of nuclear weapons. Maybe they could send a message to get the United States to back off, and they could live to fight another day.
Very good. Daniel.
Well, Dr. Kim, I can jump in here if Pierre's not gonna, if he's working at troubleshooting his technology, because given Dr. Kroenig, your short, sharp, and very punchy advice for undergrads, what advice would you have for PhD students trying to finish their dissertation? I'm a PhD candidate at the Nunn School at Georgia Tech now, and trying to work on the page a day approach. But I'm curious if you have any advice on how to get the dissertation done.
Very good.
Well, you're at a great place at Georgia Tech, and please give all my friends there my best, Larry Rubin and Jenna Jordan and Adam Stolberg and others.
Absolutely, yeah, they're on my committee as well.
Okay, good. To better tailor my advice, can I ask, do you hope to go on the academic job market? Do you hope to go more in a policy direction? Because they are very different trajectories.
Originally, it was full on policy, but now that job market is also tenuous, I'm hedging my bets and trying both, which may not be the best strategy.
Good. Well, it's still what I'm doing too. I haven't decided if I want to be an academic or a policy wonk. So you're in good company. So what I'd say then is it's easier. Well, first of all, it's hard to make it as an academic. It's hard to make it as a policy expert, and so trying to do both is difficult. But if you want to try to keep your options open, I would double down on the academic side first, because it's easier for a serious academic to make the transition into policy than vice versa. So I guess I would design a dissertation that meets the kind of highest social science standards, try to publish side projects or pieces of your dissertation in serious peer-reviewed journals, present at academic conferences, APSA, ISA, et cetera, impress your committee so they write letters of recommendation saying that you walk on water, and then go on the academic job market and then see what happens. And essentially that's what I did. I thought I'll go on the academic job market, and if my best offer is I don't know, a community college in Missouri, maybe I'll try something else. But I was fortunate to get a tenure track offer at Georgetown, and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool to teach at what I think is the best school in Washington, D.C. But so I'd say double down on the academic side for now and play that out, and then transition later if necessary.
Very good. Daniel, Dan?
I think that
Yes.
or no.
Yeah, you don't have any question to Professor. Go ahead.
I think that's perfect advice to lean more favorably on the academic side, because it's much harder to make the transition the other way around. And so I'm slowly shifting my time and attention, if you will, more to preparing my academic credentials. So thank you.
Very good. Pierre, do you have any follow-on question?
So I think maybe you can hear me this time.
Okay, very good.
Oh, wow, that was difficult for me. In spite of the picture there, I'm actually retired. I'm 70 years old. So that's my picture when I was a student in university a long time ago. So I'm an ardent follower of DPRK situation for about since 2021. I've interviewed some people that have been there in person in the DPRK. One of them, Etienne Daou, is from Montreal. Maybe you're aware of him. And my question is, I saw in the news recently that THAAD and Patriot missiles are in the process of being removed from South Korea to be sent to Iran. Of course, you might knock it down and saying this total false news. I don't know, but that's what I saw. If so, how about South Korea? How should South Korea react to this? Should they be worried?
Very good.
Yeah, good question. And to be honest, I don't know the details of those systems and whether they're being transferred, but it is the case that U.S. military assets from other regions are being redeployed to the Middle East to deal with the conflict. So I wouldn't be surprised. And so I guess I see it in a short-term versus a medium and long-term perspective. So in the short term, I do think that the conflict in Iran does take away from the U.S. capability to deal with other challenges. There's the issue with munitions. We're expending so many munitions in the war in Iran. So those are munitions that won't be available elsewhere, redeploying assets that aren't going to be available elsewhere. And then there's just maintenance and readiness and training issues, with long deployments for the Ford and other things, that if something in Korea were to kick off tomorrow, realistically, the United States would be less ready than it would like. And in fact, I've mentioned my colleague Marcus, who runs our Indo-Pacific program at the Atlantic Council. But the director of our defense program, Joe Costa, had an op-ed in the Washington Post 2 days ago about how the conflict in Iran is taking away from our readiness for conflict in the Indo-Pacific. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And he co-authored it with Eli Ratner, who was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Indo-Pacific in the Biden administration. So it's a smart piece from two authorities. But I do think over the medium to long term, it could actually increase the U.S. ability to focus on the Indo-Pacific. And Sean and I were talking about this earlier. If we are able to lance the boil, I think as Sean put it, of the Iran threat, then I think it makes it easier for us to finally pivot from the Middle East and focus on challenges in other regions, including that posed by North Korea.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Yun-So, do you have any follow-on question?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, Jung-Soo, go ahead.
If I may follow up on your previous comment, there seems to be the new leader of Iran appears to have been seriously injured, but also at the same time, we don't see Benjamin Netanyahu showing up after the U.S. attack of Iran. And there's wild rumors spreading in the internet, at least, that he might be struck by the ballistic missile along with his brother. So do you foresee that the real, and so in Iran, the leaders has been decapitated, but the regime has not been changed, it seems to me. Mm-hmm. But do you think that there could be a regime change in Israel? Mm. And possibly if November election turns out badly for Donald Trump, do you think there will be a regime change in Washington, D.C.?
Good. All right. So regime change in 3 countries. Simple topic I can address in 90 seconds. First on regime change in Tehran. And so you're right that so far we've seen continuity. And, the reality, unfortunately, has been that for many years, the regime in Iran is armed and the opposition is unarmed. And the regime has been willing to kill to stay in power, and the opposition hasn't been willing to rise up and die in large enough numbers to seize power. And so it's hard to see that dynamic changing, but not impossible. At some point the security services say that they're unwilling to continue to do this and stand aside or side with the people against the remnants of the regime. So right now, I'd say, if I were a betting man, that the Islamic Republic will survive, but it's not certain. There is a risk that they could fall. On the rumors of Netanyahu's injury, I hadn't seen that, to be honest. You might be right. But I guess, in Israel, it's a consolidated democracy. So if something were to happen to Netanyahu, there is an institutionalized process for electing new leaders. I think regime change, and same for the United States, of course, why regime change in Iran is so much more likely is that autocratic systems don't have institutionalized processes for choosing successors. And so I think the risk, and we've seen this historically, of regime collapse much more likely in autocracies than in consolidated democracies. A regime change in the United States, I have a PhD in political science, and so I've taken American politics courses, so I know just enough to be dangerous. I think one thing that we know is that it's typical for a president to lose seats in a midterm election. And so likely the Democrats gain seats in the House, maybe even in the Senate. And so we could be dealing with a divided government after the midterms with more Democratic control in Congress and Republican control of the executive. And I think one thing that may be of interest to this group, though, is that when that happens, when a president is frustrated with his domestic agenda, then he focuses more on foreign policy, where he has more of a free hand. So we could see an even more energetic presidency in the second half of the administration for President Trump. And then we'll have to see in 2028. I think there are some good candidates on the on both sides. So we'll have to see who emerges.
Very good. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, time is up. Professor Kroenig, we'll let you go. You're very famous tonight. And wonderful. We'll get back to you, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really an honor. I enjoyed the conversation and hope your audience found it useful.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The program is adjourned. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone. Hije, Yunseo,
Thank you
Pierre,
very much.
and Alex from Seoul. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.